everyone, and welcome to Thorough Newspaper Analysis, which is brought to you by Losico. So, today we'll be discussing three articles. All the three are from the Indian Express. The first article is titled as When the Arctic Warms. So, this article talks about a very serious climate issue that we are soon going to be dealing with is the warming of the Arctic and the melting of the ice of the Arctic Circle, which is going on at a very fast rate. So, what are the repercussions of it? We'll be discussing in this article. The second one is titled as A Year to Engage and Assert. So this article very beautifully entails all the challenges and the upcoming opportunities as well for the year 2021 that our country India has to look forward to. So what way we can deal with all these things has been discussed in this article. And thirdly, three states, three anti conversion laws. What's similar, what's different? So, this is a very beautiful comparison which has been drawn. A comparative analysis has been done amongst the anti conversion laws of Madhya Pradesh, Himachal Pradesh, and Uttar Pradesh. So, what are the differences and what are the points of similarities in these laws must be discussed over here. And next we have the news and flash column, wherein we'll be discussing small and crisp news points that are more important for our prelims exam. So if you're also preparing for judicial services examination, you can definitely have a look at the Lord of the Courses, which is the judiciary test prep course coming from LawSeco. So this course has been specifically drafted for all the judicial services aspirants. The link to this course is available in the description box below. And from the landing page, you can also download free study material for your own help. Also, we are excelling into courses like CLAT, All India Bar Exam, SEBI, etc. You can have a look at them too. With this, let's see that what is the multiple choice question for the day. So basically, this is from the discussion for 31st December. N501Y or N501Y recently seen in news is a COVID mutation, a new anti-ship missile, a rocket fuel discovered on moon, or none of the above. You can write down an answer in the comment section below. So this is the descriptive question for the day. The recently promulgated anti-conversion laws are not only arbitrary to freedom of religion, but also hamper the cultural harmony of our country. Critically discuss. So, if as I've already told you all, that wherever this term critically is there, critically analyze, critically discuss, or critically, think about it. So you have to write the pros as well as the cons of this statement, as in the things that you have in support of the statement, as well as the things that you have against this particular motion. With this, let's discuss the first article for the day, which talks about the Arctic global warming and its effects. So the presence of global warming is most dramatically felt in the Arctic region. Now, as we know that when we talk about the global warming and the all things that we are seeing under the climate change, then a recent problem or the biggest problem that we can discuss is of the melting of the snow or the snow caps that we have in our on our Earth. So this has also been witnessed in the Arctic region. So it is actually warming up 2 times faster than the global average. So since 1980, the volume has declined by 75%. So you can consider that just in 40 years, 75% of these Arctic glaciers have already declined and they have melted down. And the northern sea route could be ice-free by 2050. So in the very next slide, we will be discussing about the northern sea route and what actually is the significance of the northern sea route. But then it says that it could become ice free, that is completely the ice would have melted in the northern sea route by 2050, that is just 30 years later. But now what we need to see more importantly is that why are we really concerned, or why should we be really concerned by the melting of this snow in the Arctic region? So for that reason, we need to understand that there are a lot of impact and effects that are, the repercussions that are to follow because of this global warming and this melting of the ice in the Arctic region. Firstly, let's understand that, for example, an ice cube. For example, let's say that we have a complete ice tray in which we had the ice cubes that were frozen. Now, if we take them out of the refrigerator or the freezer that we call, so then when with the warming up of the temperature, the ice cubes melt and they finally convert into water. Now, what happens is that this water also needs, or it also occupies some space. But as you must have noticed that whenever the water it freezes down, it contracts, as in the ice cube always appears smaller as compared to the water that is filled in that particular ice tray. Just let's understand this with the similar analogy, that the water, which is ultimately held in the shape of, or in the form of ice in the Arctic region, when this ice starts melting, where will this huge amount of water go? So this we need to understand, that it is not really possible that the entire amount of water would just evaporate. And even if it does evaporate, it will definitely cause a huge problem in the monsoons, and maybe heavy rains would take place. And if at all it is not able to evaporate, then this water will definitely flow downwards towards our oceans and other water bodies, and thus the water level of this entire earth will rise, causing a lot and lot of floods and other water disasters. So the effects of this melting of the snow or the ice in the Arctic region will have on the climate as well, wherein the loss of ice and warming waters will affect sea and salinity levels and current precipitation levels as well. Now what we need to understand is that, see, the oceans have a particular amount of salinity, the amount of salt that they have to maintain. Now if at all new water is continuously being added up into this water, definitely the salinity will be either in a positive or a negative way, it would be hampered, due to which the very cycles of ocean water, or the very life that is there of the flora and fauna in the ocean water, would be hampered. Then the salinity levels, as we have discussed, would change. It would also affect the sea levels, because obviously, if, for example, just consider that there is a glass of water that we currently have, and it is 75% filled. Now this is the exact amount of water that we really want to be there in this glass, and only this glass can only handle this much water with full with in a proper sense. Now if we keep on filling up and filling up this glass of water again and again with new amounts of water, then there is a chance, and there will be for sure overflowing or the overflooding of this glass. Similar is the situation with our earth and also the oceans that we have in our on our earth. So when this huge amount of water will just release from the due to the melting down of the Arctic Circle, so then these oceans and other water bodies will be hugely flooded, and the sea level or the water level will also rise, causing various other kinds of water disasters. And then even the precipitation levels would change, because definitely the precipitation or the rain that we talk about, it is a complete cycle that takes place on the entire earth. Now if at all the amount of water enormously increases, then definitely there is a chance that the evaporation would increase, and thus the precipitation would increase, causing a lot of harm to the flora, fauna, agriculture, food security, people, infrastructure, and everything that we can imagine to. Then the tundra is returning to swamp. Now, as we know that we have different kinds of forests, so the tundra forest is again returning to swamp. Now, this will become very wet kind of a forest, and then again the flora and fauna of this entire area would be hampered. Then the sudden storms ravaging coastlines would be there. So on the coastlines, definitely now here what we need to understand, that it is a alarming thing for India as well, because we might think that okay, we are far away from the Arctic Circle, so we might not really need to worry. So it does not really happen like that. This earth is completely interconnected, the water bodies, the land mass, it is all interconnected with each other. India also has a very long coastline when we come to our western and the eastern side, which we call as the Western Ghats and the Eastern Ghats, and even the entire side of other neighboring countries also. So if at all there is any problem that causes the rise in the sea level, salinity level, current or precipitation levels, India as a country will also have to suffer, and that is why we also need to take active steps in making sure that the Arctic, it does not melt down, and that too with such great speed. So the wildfires have devastated Canada and Russia, as we already know, and they will further increase if this happens. Rich biodiversity and indigenous groups like 40 are Arctic under threat. So in the Arctic Circle also, rich biodiversity and indigenous groups over there, approximately 40 of them are under threat already due to the deteriorating situation or the climate change over there. Now, it's like one thing that we need to know here is that obviously the repercussions of this are huge, but there are also some positive ends or some positive side to this entire melting down of the Arctic. But of course, we'll have to weigh in the later stage as to what do we want and what can be, it is better to be, to let go, because there are some positive sides to the opening of the Arctic, like huge commercial and economic opportunities in shipping, energy, fisheries, and minerals. Now, as we know that oceans are, they have always been a huge source of hydrocarbons and of energy, minerals, oils, fisheries, etc. And the entire region of the Arctic Circle is definitely unexplored, because due to the huge amounts of ice and snow, it was definitely not feasible for the various nations to go and expedite over there. So that is why there is a huge chance that we would find huge reservoirs of shipping, energy, fisheries, and minerals, etc. The navigation through the Northern Sea route, which we'll just discuss in the very next slide, will cut distance between Rotterdam to Yokohama by 40%. Now, this is the point which we are discussing over here. So this is the Northern Sea route, which currently, obviously due to the huge amounts of snow over here, is not open. So this thing which we are talking about, so this is the Notre Dame, and then from here we have the Yokohama. So this area now, currently, when we have to travel from this side to this side, we have to move all the way from this side, which is the Yellow Sea. Then we have the South China Sea. Then we move from Strait of Malacca. We come here in the Indian Ocean. And then we cross the entire area. Then we cross the Arabian Sea. Then we cross this area of Red Sea, and we move entirely from here to the Mediterranean Sea. And then we are able to reach this area of Norway, which is over here. But just imagine that if this very route it opens up, because currently it is not available for any kind of navigation because of huge amounts of snow, and definitely it is not practical to move in this area. So then this entire region, instead of moving from this side, we can definitely move from here. This will be the Bering Strait from Alaska. So US, we can move directly from here and we can reach to this area near to Norway. So this is the entire thing that we were discussing. This is Rotterdam, and from here is the Yokohama. So definitely a huge distance, the navigation through the Northern Sea route. So basically this is known as the Northern Sea route, which is currently not functional, but if at all the melting takes place at this very pace, then it would be available by at least 2050. So the navigation through the NSR will cut distance between Rotterdam and Yokohama by 40%. 22% of the world's oil and natural gas deposits are in the Arctic. So you can imagine that how huge these reservoirs would be, of being 22% of the world's oil and natural gas. And 25% of the global reserves of rare mineral deposits are buried in the Greenland. Now, this area, as we know, is Greenland. So, due to the huge, snow caps that are there in this region, it is not definitely possible and feasible to expedite for these resources currently. But if at all, after 20 to 30 years, if this huge melting down of snow takes place, then this would be possible. But being responsible citizens and natives of this Mother Earth, we need to understand that are these enough in a way what we can call as incentives to actually destroy our earth in such a huge manner, because we can understand that definitely various commercial benefits will be gained from this region, but we need to imagine that whether or not we'll be really alive for a longer period of time to actually use these commercial benefits or not, because of this huge environmental and climate devastation that would take place due to melting down of this snow. And other things that we need to keep in mind is that navigation is definitely dangerous. High cost and environmental risk is there for the mining and drilling activities. Then, unlike Antarctica, Arctic is not a global common, and only Russia, Canada, Norway, Denmark, which we call as the Greenland as well, and US are putting over their rights on this area. Now, as we know that for Antarctica, we have this entire treaty to which all of us are signatories, and we say that it can only be used for scientific and research purposes, and it cannot be used for any kinds of commercial purposes. But unlike such treaty for Antarctica, Arctic does not really have any particular treaty like that, though we have an Arctic Council, but still it is only for environmental and other reasons, but not for the security reasons. And in the Arctic region, only Russia, Canada, Norway, Denmark, and US. Now, as you can see from here, the longest coastline that we are seeing on the littoral side is of the Russia. Then we have Norway. Then this area, we have, this entire area, we have Alaska, USA. Then we also have other areas which we are calling as Denmark and Canada. So as you can see over here, this would be Canada. And here this area, you can see Canada. Alaska is from United States of America. Greenland, Russia, Norway. So these are the areas that are actually, they actually surround the Arctic region. And these are the ones that are actually putting up their claims on the Arctic things. Now let's understand about the sovereignty over the Arctic. Russia, Canada, Norway, and Denmark have overlapping claims for extended continental shelves. So what we need to understand here is that the only international law that actually puts any kind of or has any control over the Arctic region is the UNCLOS, which is the United Nations Convention of the Law of Sea. And according to it, US is not a signatory of the UNCLOS. And other than US, Russia, Canada, Norway, and Denmark are the signatories. And that is why using the extent of their continental shelves. Now, already we had studied about the entire study about the territorial sea, the continental shelf, high sea, and contagious zone, etc. So like for example, Russia is the borderline of the coastline of Russia is here. So it says that if we at all count our continental shelf or the right that we have over the waters of Russia, then we will be covering the Arctic Ocean as well. So the US, as we said, is not a party to the United Convention of the Law of the Sea and is unable to put a formal claim, but under pressure, there is to increase its presence. It is trying to increase its presence in the Arctic region. China has military exercise with Russia in the Eastern Pacific. And as we know that recently, the relationships between China and Russia have been developing in a positive sense. And that is why any extent or any move of Russia would might also benefit the presence of China over there. And also the projects like the Polar Silk Road, which is an extension to the Border Roads Initiative, which is the BRI, which is the Belt and Road Initiative, my bad. So which has been brought by China. So there is an extension to it, which is the Polar Silk Road, which will go through the Arctic region. So there also China will definitely make an initiative to increase its presence. And it is also invested heavily in ports, energy, undersea infrastructure, and mining projects over there. Now, here are the India's interests. So extensive coastline, as we discussed, makes it vulnerable to the impacts of the Arctic warming, because obviously if there is any change in the coastline or in the salinity levels or the sea levels or any kind of precipitation levels, then definitely the huge coastline of India will also have an impact on through it. Then the scientific research in Arctic can be used to understand the third pole, that is the Himalayas. Now, as we know that the Hindu Kush region of the Himalayas, of which India is a very important part, so it is considered to be as the third pole of the world due to the enormous amount of snow or ice that is there in this region. And any kind of scientific research about the things that are, or about the minerals or hydrocarbons that are available in the Arctic region can help India understand the very importance and usage of the third pole, that is the Himalayas, also in our region. Then China's active role in the Arctic and increasing presence in relationship with Russia will be closely monitored by India, as we just discussed, because India needs to keep a close watch rather, on the on any move that is made by China. Since 2013, India has an observer status in the Arctic Council, which we just discussed. So it is the predominant intergovernmental forum for cooperation on environment and developmental aspects of Arctic. We need to understand that this does not till date include any kind of security, collaborations or something, but only the developmental and environmental aspects. And it was re-elected in 2019. So India has an observer status in the Arctic Council. Okay. So with this, let's discuss the second article for the day, which talks about India's 2021 challenges and opportunities. So after a disruptive year, India has to accept the harsh realities and deal with the new challenges and opportunities in 2021. So here some opportunities as well as challenges are discussed for India. Like China's aim for top, as we know that under President Xi Jinping since 2013, China has been consolidating its global influence, and it saw pandemic as an opportunity rather than as something that would deter its movement. And that is why India has to understand that China is trying every now and then to increase its influence on the global world, and India needs to compete that very efficiently. Then the Trump Americans. So under Trump, US vacated the leadership space in many world stage. This new political base is to continue influencing the Democrat policies too. Now, as we know that even if we talk about the World Trade Organization or the World Health Organization also, the Trump administration had pulled off American support from there. So these protectionist policies of America can also hamper the relationships or the benefits that India draws from America, like for example, the H-1B visa issue, and also the issue which we were also lately discussing about, the very issue of wherein the United States trade representative had taken off India from developing nations list and had put it into developed nations. So these are the things that India needs to be very careful about. Then acceptance of Taliban, as we know that US has finally made peace in February 2020, had made peace. India looks to re-engage with this, and due to this, there might be challenges that the activities of Taliban crossing through Afghanistan and Pakistan might reach Pak-occupied Kashmir and finally, the Indian side of the Kashmir region. So India needs to be very wary of that too. Then Middle East, Saudi and Iran are competing for leadership along with Turkey in the Islamic world. So because India has good relations with both in the current state, except for Turkey, we have good relations with Iran as well as with Saudi Arabia. So India needs to create a balance over there as well. Then the Russia-China bonding. So after the annexation of Crimea in 2014, it has seen that China has been becoming a friend of Russia, and India also itself is a very good friend, has always been a friend to Russia. But lately, the deteriorating relationships between India and China need to be checked and need to be kept in mind, because this might hamper at large stretch India Russia relationships as well. So India needs to create a good balance over here as well. And then assertive neighbors. If we talk about the CA and RC issue for Bangladesh, Bangladesh was not really happy with India bringing the CA or the NRC law, and we need and currently, even if we talk about, for the other reasons, for even the trade as well, Bangladesh is a very important friend and a neighbor for India. India needs to keep in mind. And Nepal's new map in active China as well. And as we know that recently Nepal also, even after having historically affluent relationships with India, it had released its map, including the Lipudhara and other regions which India had under its own map. So here also we need to find a consensus with all these nations. Now, these are the few challenges and opportunities that we need to counter China, as we discussed. Then, as we know that India has again, for the 8th time, been chosen as the non-permanent member of the United Nations Security Council. So there are huge, responsibilities on the shoulders of India as a nation to bring about multipolarity and other, aspirations that other nations are looking forward to from India. Then we have to develop our friendship with US back again, and expectations from Biden government are to be seen. Then future of the Quad and Indo-Pacific strategy, along with US, Japan, Australia, and India as well. Deal with the United Kingdom and the European Union. So Boris Johnson will be the chief guest of the Republic Day. So that also is a very positive and welcome step. And then engaging with neighbors for the vaccine diplomacy as well. So these are the things that India has in 2021 as challenges as well as opportunities. And finally, let's discuss the third article, wherein we have the state conversion laws, a comparative analysis. So we have it for Madhya Pradesh, Uttar Pradesh, and Himachal Pradesh. So as we know that they have passed these anti-conversion laws. So we'll study them by head to head. Like for notice for Madhya Pradesh, a 60-day prior declaration of the intention to convert has to be given to the DM. In Uttar Pradesh, again, it has to be 60 days. In Himachal Pradesh, it has to be 30 days. The investigation. No investigation has to take place in Madhya Pradesh unless a written complaint has been brought by any person converted or the parents or the siblings of such person. In Uttar Pradesh, no prosecution shall take place unless prior sanction of the officer or not below SDM has not been taken. And then for Himachal, it is same as Madhya Pradesh. Then the burden of proof. For Madhya Pradesh, it is on the person who has converted. But for Uttar Pradesh, it is on the person who caused or facilitated the conversion. And on Himachal, it is again on the person converted. So here also is a point of difference. Then maintenance and inheritance. So the marriage would be null and void, but children have right to maintenance. In Uttar Pradesh, there is no such provision for maintenance and inheritance. And again, for Himachal Pradesh, there is no such provision. Then the punishment is a jail term in Madhya Pradesh for 1 to 5 years or 2 to 10 years for SC/ST. Then for Uttar Pradesh, it is exactly the same. And for Himachal Pradesh, it is almost same, just 2 to 7 years for women, minor, and SC/STs. So this was a comparative analysis of the provisions of the anti-conversion laws of these three states. Now, being a sovereign and also being a secular nation, we need to understand at large that how far these anti-conversion laws cater to the very needs of our secular character of our constitution, and did we really need these laws or not? But obviously that is again a different question to be pondered upon. So with this, let's see what do we have for news in flash today. Covishield has been approved in India. So an expert committee under the DCGI, which is the Drug Controller General of India, has approved the use of the vaccine Covishield with certain conditions. So though it has not really cleared all the stages of trial, but still in the emergency situations, it has been given a green signal. So it is the Indian version of the vaccine developed by University of Oxford and AstraZeneca. So this was actually the AstraZeneca, and this Covishield is almost an Indian version of that. So that was all for the day. We hope it was a good session for you all. If in case you wish to download the PDF of today's slides, please join our Telegram group. The link to this group is available in the description box below. You can also visit our website for any other information. Thank you so much.